What is going on, everybody? It is your boy GZTV. Welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about Nobody 2. Obviously last night at the time I'm recording this I dropped the review for the first Nobody, but the sequel just came out last year. It's another kind of 2025 film, even though we've been kind of exploring those earlier in the year. I actually need to go back and check and see if there's any of those I need to finish up. But Nobody 2. Bob Odenkirk has officially become a legitimate action star here. Has definitely established himself in the role if he didn't already in the original. When the first movie came out, I remember everybody saying Saul Goodman, an action hero? No way. Now after two movies, this isn't Saul Goodman anymore. This is Hutch Mansell. I actually like this movie a lot. I don't know if I'd necessarily call it better than the first one all the way, because honestly, they're almost neck and neck. I might give this one the slight nod, but I do love the direction they took it. Instead of trying to become a John Wick 2.0, they decided to throw this insane assassin into the middle of a family vacation. Ridiculous, over the top, violent, surprisingly wholesome, and somehow it works. So without further ado, I think this video is going to be much shorter than the last one. Let's get into it. So getting into the premise, basically the movie sold me immediately the second I kind of saw snapshots of like the vacation setting and even the movie poster, which it kind of looks low quality on my computer. Instead of simply making the first movie bigger, they ask a fun question. What happens when one of the deadliest men alive actually tries to take his family on vacation, actually tries to take a break from this criminal underworld, this whole shit that he got himself into where he has to pay off the Russian mob? That sounds ridiculous on paper, but that's exactly why it works. Again, the whole vacation setting, and the first movie already got me hooked, and now we're going on vacation and we're at this resort that he went to as a kid, and there's sentimental value. He brings his father along. Hutch is trying to repair his marriage and spend time with his kids and try to find an outlet to get away and kind of have this bonding time, live something close to a normal life. I mean, that's what vacation is. That's what happens when we strip ourselves away from work. We try to live how we want to, but trouble follows him wherever he goes. Throw in a corrupt small town, a criminal empire, crooked cops, and a bunch of people who underestimate this quiet suburban dad, and you've got another excuse for absolute mayhem, another good entry in the franchise and a reason for this to be a franchise. It keeps the franchise identity intact while giving it a fresh summer setting that makes it stand apart from the original, and hey, that's perfect. It's summer at the time I'm recording this. Getting into the good, the movie is just plain enjoyable. The setting, all of the different fights and stuff. Bob Odenkirk has completely made Hutch Mansell his own character at this point as well. It's really embodied him, and it's added another iconic character on a somewhat short cult classic-esque list of characters that Bob Odenkirk has played. Bob Odenkirk has had a very interesting career to where he's obviously a legend. I'll obviously hail him as one of the best actors probably ever, at least of this generation, at least of this century, but it's not like he's in every single movie. It's not like the drop of a hat he's going to be in the next movie. But the novelty of Saul Goodman doing action is kind of gone because, well, he is officially kind of in the role now, and that's a huge compliment because now I just see Hutch. It's not like, oh, well, look, it's Saul Goodman, guys. No, I'm getting used to Bob Odenkirk being the character, if that makes sense. He's more comfortable balancing his family with his violent past, and I actually cared more about his personal life this time around. Now, I will say the lore isn't quite being uncovered at the level that I want to at the moment, but I really like him as a person. I really like him from a personal standpoint, and some of the stuff he goes through, and he's trying to make things right, and it seems like in the end all is well. We'll have to see what 3 and 4 do, because I do think Bob Odenkirk said he wants to make a 3rd and 4th film. The vacation setting, of course, was a genius decision. Just getting into that, just getting into the aesthetic and how that kind of works with the action as well. It is such a fun time. Who doesn't like to go on vacation, or at least be able to relive that feeling or put in that world and immerse yourselves in a movie like this? The family vacation of the Griswolds, even with the struggles they had, just the vibe of going on vacation, the road trips, all the family time, all the fun shit you do at night, going to the pool during the day, the bright resort, the arcade, the cabin. It's such a cool little resort. The water park, the colorful scenery. It creates this great contrast against some of the most brutal action in the movie, and again, just some of the set pieces that they're able to utilize given that they're on vacation. You're on a duck boat and you're absolutely embarrassing these guys, putting a duck on top of this guy's head, fishing nets, little pokey sticks, and throwing people overboard, and it's absolutely insane. And this movie is very resourceful. Again, you can go watch my first review, because a lot of the stuff, honestly, I'm going to say in this review is almost going to be rehashings of the first review, because this movie is very similar in concept. It's very similar in principle in terms of just its identity, because it uses absolutely everything. The final fight turns a roller coaster on, fucking smacks the shit out of them. The whack-a-mole, like all the crazy shit, the arcade escapade fight as well is awesome. It almost feels like a family vacation comedy smashed together with a John Wick style action film. Now, I won't say it goes all the way comedy because honestly this movie isn't as comedic in the way that it should be as the first film, but still. The action continues to be phenomenal. Again, creative weapons, traps, explosions, close quarters combat, pretty practical choreography. It makes almost every fight entertaining. Of course, Christopher Lloyd and RZA once again show up and make their presence somewhat known, although it's a little more subtle this time around. It still is pretty formulaic in the way that they kind of come around at the end to help save Hutch's ass almost as a whole drug empire is coming up against him. And maybe it's a little formulaic, and maybe you can kind of hate on the movie for that because it definitely wears the inspiration of the first movie on its sleeve. Christopher Lloyd does steal scenes, you know, just being kind of a father and trying to kind of bond with his grandkids. This was the only vacation Hutch ever went to, which is why it has so much sentimental value, and throughout the movie he's kind of talking about this, he's reliving the memories. You do see a personal side of him, and once again I have to harp on that as being a pretty good strength because the first movie, it's not that he's an NPC because Bob Odenkirk couldn't possibly play an NPC, but there's not as much personality in that movie as I wanted, and this one definitely brings it out of him and brings out the romantic side with him and his wife and buying her the bottle of wine that was made where and when they first met in Rome. When Christopher Lloyd shows up, when RZA becomes a really fun supporting character, it's great. I also appreciated that Becca and the kids actually mattered this time. That is a very big standpoint here to kind of discuss. The family actually matters in this movie. Instead of just being background characters, instead of just being something to push over that he has to kind of go home and deal with, they actually become a pretty big part of the story. It's a strong family dynamic. It raises the stakes whenever they're involved, and it gives Hutch some more motivation as he's getting more connected and as he's getting closer with his family and trying to kind of reconcile, because I'm sure before this franchise started, in the timeline of it, he was a loving father, he was a great dad, I'm sure. I mean, him and his wife up to that point were married for 14 years, basically like his whole daughter's life. And the villains are also pretty good. Like, there's a few gripes, a few nitpicks I'm gonna have, I think, throughout the video about the villains, but Colin Hanks plays a villain here, and I don't really remember what movies I've seen him in, but I've certainly seen him on screen before. Of course, the legendary Tom Hanks' son. He plays one of those characters you are supposed to hate. Like, they perfectly design him to be an absolute douchebag. Like, I'm the sheriff in town, I'm the man around here, cower down, I've been pushed around my whole life. And the retribution and the payoff of that makes that awesome. Sharon Stone is a very fun, over-the-top screen presence. I'm sure they kind of exaggerated her character on purpose, but of course, Sharon Stone, always a welcome inclusion in movies. She's one of the best actresses of all time. So there you kind of go. Again, a little corny, a little cheeky, the way they kind of portray her character. It's all very, like, stereotypical. It almost feels like a Dhar Mann skit if you've ever seen one of those, but the payoff with that and her getting exploded and Colin Hanks getting gunned down, it's bittersweet, man. Getting into the battle, I will say, just in terms of the lore and the mythology and of the universe, the biggest issue here is that it doesn't really expand. And you guys saw my first review, you know I kind of wanted some answers for some of the stuff they were going for. We did not get that, unfortunately, hardly at all. There are still so many unanswered questions about his past, in terms of Hutch, his family history. He's still somewhat a mysterious man. He's still somewhat seen as a man that just goes around and fucks everybody up. His time working with the government, even Becca's background up to this point, I'm starting to question because she's getting more involved. Now, obviously, that creates a lot of hype for this to become a franchise, given her character could develop into an actual partner in crime type of situation, like a Bonnie and Clyde type of thing with Hutch. Like, that would be great if they really expand upon that. I don't know if I should keep wishing on stuff for this franchise, because although I have enjoyed these last two movies, and this movie probably is better than the first one, every time I wish for something, they don't do it. And obviously they make it up with different things. Like, obviously the family is expanded and the characters actually matter this time around, and his daughter getting slapped and his son getting into fights is all further motivation for Hutch to do what he does and not be on necessarily a homicidal path, but be a man on a mission, a man looking to protect his family and to get revenge and all of this stuff. And again, the mystery is intriguing. I know that is kind of part of the identity of the franchise, is that you have to have some mystery, but after two movies I would have liked a few more concrete answers. We need a lore dump. We need a bunch of revelations to happen, maybe even in the third film. Now, if they're making a third film, I don't know when that's going to come out. Hell, it could be 2030 by the time we get that, but still. And the villains, again, I will nitpick them. While entertaining, they don't quite leave the same impression as Julian. Julian so far is easily the best out of the three, and of course I love the idea of dual villains. It's obviously a very risky thing to try to take place in a movie, and I always respect when people pull this off well, but Julian is easily the best of the three. Sharon Stone arrives relatively late, and her criminal empire kind of feels neglected almost. It almost feels like, what the hell is the point of this? Are you just selling drugs to sell drugs? Is it something that ran in the family? I don't know. It doesn't really get explored. There's not a lot of lore, and everything kind of just wraps up. Honestly, Sharon Stone is only in the movie for a third of it. The third act of the movie is basically just Sharon Stone. Out of nowhere, she's like at this party, and she's at this very high-end place, and she's celebrating with a bunch of people, and that's just her. She's the villain. And of course, I love a female villain as well. I can't forget to mention that. Comedy-wise, I don't think this is necessarily terrible, but I still want to put it in the negative because I do think what the original film set up to be is that this franchise was supposed to be somewhat funny. It was supposed to mix some elements of that in there, and I just don't think this movie was as funny. It just felt a lot more brutal. The absurdity is still hilarious. A guy blowing in like a tumbleweed randomly, a random suburban dad coming into this small town resort place. The center of the town is literally just this resort, so obviously police are going to be everywhere. He just starts wreaking fucking havoc. He burns shit down. He beats the hell out of law enforcement, which is absolutely batshit insane. But there aren't as many memorable laugh out loud moments or like lines or anything like, ha, yeah. There's really not as much of that in the first film. I think the first film, that's really the only thing it does better. That and the villain. So there you kind of go. Moving into the okay. Now, obviously with franchises, a lot of the times with sequels, you get a cheesy territory. It seems to be a trope in the movie world that the sequel's always going to be cheesy because they try to rehash something. They try to redo what they did in the original because obviously that's what worked. That's what got people's asses in the seats. And it got a little cheesy, and I'm a little mixed on some of the executions here. I don't really know how to explain it. Just some of the dialogue and even like the opening scene literally exactly copying what they did in the first movie where he's talking to the cops, nobody too, and it flashes to the title screen. It's like, okay. And also some of the action requires you to completely suspend your disbelief, but honestly that's become part of the franchise's identity. If you're looking for grounded realism, this probably isn't it. A lot of modern action films seem to kind of suspend belief, especially with like the comic book world and Marvel even. I'm not saying this movie is inspired by that, but Marvel being a big part of the 2010s, leaning into the 2020s, actually we have a pretty big year ahead of us for Marvel Avengers. But people don't really give a fuck about grounded action movies. Like John Wick's a pretty grounded action movie to an extent, but not this, so that's fine. The new director also brings a slightly different visual style. I still think it feels like a nobody movie. There is a new director. I actually didn't realize there was a new director until I went back, looked at my notes, looked at some of the credentials for this movie, who directed it. I always like to look at the wiki page and kind of see the cast members because if I don't recognize someone, I can go back and say, oh, there you go. But I wouldn't have minded seeing the original director continue with the series for consistency, and it's not just because they're completely different directors. I honestly think it's somewhat similar. It just takes place in a different spot, and maybe that's a little more spectacle, maybe that's a little more bait for the theaters, but just for the showmanship, I like when franchises keep the same director. I think it's kind of weird. I think the same even more so about casting changes. Like, remember when War Machine got recasted in Iron Man? Like, shit like that. It's just not very good showmanship. It's just not very good logically for the franchise. Finally, the family drama is improved, but I still think Hutch and Becca could have even stronger chemistry. It's believable enough, but it never reaches the emotional highs that it probably aims for. Again, anything I'm saying hopefully gets resolved eventually as the franchise goes on. I'm gonna give this a moment to cook. I'm gonna let Bob and the guys cook. We'll have to see what they do. So getting into the review, Nobody 2 proves that the first movie wasn't a fluke. It doesn't reinvent the formula, and honestly it doesn't need to. It simply takes everything that worked in the original, gives the family a much larger role, throws everyone into a fun vacation setting, and delivers another round of creative, brutal action. Bob Odenkirk deserves a ton of credit. 5 years ago, nobody expected him to become one of the better modern action stars, even going into the press release and the rollout of the original film, and now Hutch Mansell feels completely natural, feels like another another character up there with Saul Goodman that he can kind of add to his arsenal. Christopher Lloyd and RZA continue to elevate every scene they're in, and that's a really fun thing with RZA kind of taking on spirituality and using a katana, bringing a knife to a katana fight. That's amazing. The action remains incredibly creative, and the sequel does enough differently to justify its existence without losing what made the original special and even building up hype for a possible trilogy or even fourquel. It's not quite on John Wick's level, but that's an incredibly high bar. Nobody has firmly established its own identity, and after this movie, I'm genuinely excited to see where the franchise goes next. I'm going to give it a nice 8.1 out of 10. I think it's a slight notch above the original. It's a fun, creative, and highly entertaining action sequel that keeps the momentum going while proving Hutch Mansell is one of the coolest modern action heroes around. I do believe this video should be able to come out on the 15th of July, and after that, we are getting into Knives Out, which is a really awesome trilogy. I do believe it is a trilogy up to this point, and that's going to be sick. There's a lot of dope actors that are in those films that I like. After that, if I still have time in between comic book week, because we do still plan on watching Supergirl and Spider-Man in the same week, I might watch True Lies. I think that is what it is that I had on my list. I don't know. I have a list in my notes. I'll keep you guys updated. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe. As always, go check out the social medias. It's been GZTV giving you guys movie reviews probably 3-4 times a week. Peace.